Hey everyone, it's Mr. Berg. I'm here with my first actual video, so today we're going to talk about how we can study games. Since I've said in the past that I want to have video games be seen as valid tests and potential learning tools in the classroom, I figured that a good first and quick video to make here would be to talk a bit about what video game studies might look like, or at least the kind of studies that I'm looking at using in the classroom someday. After all, literature, theater, and music have been around for a very long time, and film also has a fair head start over video games. So maybe a good first step here might be to talk about what's going on when video games are studied, or at least how some believe they should be studied. So from traditional English classes, you might be familiar with how we talk about books, poems, plays, and all other kinds of traditional texts, and that's definitely one way that we can talk about games, but it might surprise you that the field of video game studies can be pretty vast. Of course, you can analyze the game itself, which is what I'll be mostly focusing on. That's not to downplay the other areas of study at all. You can also study the experience of playing games itself, which places the focus on studying the players, or even the cultures and subcultures that form around gaming. Areas like those can be studied through a lens of sociology or studying the responses to gaming. And one popular example might be an outrage towards violent video games in the public or media, which still seems to gain some traction every now and then. But even these are just the tip of the iceberg. Right now, I'm mostly here to talk about two different approaches when it comes to studying games themselves. I'm here to talk about Ludology and Narratology. So let's talk about Narratology first, since this is an approach you're likely to be familiar with. Narratology specifically looks at games as narratives. When you take this approach, you're looking at a game in a similar way that you might look at a novel in an English class. Close analysis of the story and characters, looking for themes and greater meaning, you name it. So in general, Narratology tells us that we can take what we know about the study of literature and apply it to games. If games tell stories, then there's nothing wrong with looking at them like books, no? Some would disagree with that, though some being the ludologists. Their viewpoint can be simplified in a way to games are games. Here we're making a bit of a divide. Games shouldn't be studied as narratives, but rather as their own sort of thing. With this approach, it's more important to look at what's unique to games and what sets them apart from narratives, and it's a big one. Can you guess it? Well, if you were thinking of something having to do with actually playing the game, you're on the right track there. It's interactivity. You can read a book, but it's obvious to say that you can't interact with it like you can with a video game. It's dynamic, and experiences can vary wildly from player to player, depending on what kind of game you're talking about. There's a million different elements that we can talk about in more detail here, but I might just leave that for another time. Now, these two camps don't need to have this clear-cut division between them. It's never quite that simple. I think the radical narratology perspective would be inaccurate to say that games are nothing more than stories, and the same for radical ludology to say that stories for games are like ornaments. Nice to look at, but ultimately unnecessary. There can definitely be some overlap. Personally, I think what makes video games so incredible are their ability to make possible what's impossible in other mediums. Something that only the blending of narratives and interactivity can do. One example I can give you of this would be Bioshock. It really deserves its own video, but what I can tell you without spoiling anything is that it plays around a lot with the idea of choice, something that is definitely in your hands as the player. Of course, not all games have this lofty ideal to live up to either. They are games in the end, after all, and they're meant to be fun. A game like Tetris has no deep, dramatic narrative, but it doesn't really need one. Gameplay and interactivity form the core of a game, of course, but a good story can certainly make the game a heck of a lot more enjoyable. For example, I really like The Witcher 3 for its gameplay, but if it had the story stripped from it, it's definitely not the same, because its story makes it such an excellent game too. So I guess when I kind of take a step back and think about it, I might lean more towards the ludology camp, but I wouldn't abandon narratology outright either. Anyways, I hope that by talking a bit about narratology and ludology, I was able to teach you a little bit about what video game studies look like, or at least got you thinking about how you view games. Which makes me want to ask, by the way, which camp do you lean towards? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. I'll be seeing you all again soon. Thank you for watching.